Today on 21st Century, in India, forgotten Africans. Colombia, women in the forefront of peace. And pedestrian power in Georgia. In India, one ethnic group has a special bond with lions.
जहाँ जहाँ हम लोग हैं वहाँ लाइन है ही, मगर उसको क्या है कि हम लोग परेशान नहीं करते कि हम लोगों का जो परिवार है उसको परेशान नहीं करता, घर जैसा माहौल रहता है वो.
The Sidi people are descendants of African slaves, the history of a forgotten people.
They dance to the beat of the African drum, deep in the forest, mimicking a disappearing species that they've grown to love, the Asiatic lion. They're part of the 20,000 Sidis, an ethnic group of African descent who live in Gujarat, Western India. Though far removed from their ancestral lands, the Sidis have cherished their culture. Now it's a source of income for them.
कहीं होटल होता है, पहले हमने 1500 से स्टार्ट किया, तो इसमें से रोज का 2-3 सीजन होता है तो 6 प्रोग्राम रहता है, तो उसमें 1 आवर का खेल रहता है.
Imran is a Sidi, a descendant of the Bantu people from southeast Africa. He believes his ancestors originally came from Uganda. Now he lives in a small village called Jambor with his mother and grandmother. The village is surrounded by the forest of Gir, the last bastion of the world's 500 remaining Asiatic lions. Centuries ago, Africans from Ethiopia, Eritrea and Somalia sailed to the Indian subcontinent as merchants, while others were brought as slaves. The Sidis say they were an elite group of slaves serving the ruling class only. Because of their loyalty and military skills, they were favoured by India's Nawabs or Muslim rulers, and the Mughals, a Muslim imperial power in the early 16th century. The Sidis rose to positions of power, serving as kings themselves over princely Sidi states, a little-known fact around the world. Ambassador Saeed Akbaruddin, India's representative to the United Nations, says the Sidis form an important part of India's history.
These were a very small minority. Look at what they've accomplished for themselves and for Indian society. They rose to be noblemen, they rose to be commanders, soldiers, admirals.
Over time, most integrated fully with the local population, choosing partners of Indian heritage. To preserve their African identity, some isolated themselves, creating small villages in various parts of Gujarat. Curator and historian at the Schoenberg Center in New York, Sylviane Diouf, who's tracked the Sidi people's journey from the African coast to the Indian subcontinent, explains the roots of the Sidis currently residing in Gir.
The Sidi today are the descendants of the 1800s people, as well as some Africans who arrived actually later.
Among them were Imran's ancestors, who were brought to India in the 19th century.
और जो जूनागढ़ का जो नवाब था वो लाया हुआ था, किसी को बॉडी करके ले लाया था, कोई ऐसा कोई जिसे पटरी है, ट्रेन का पटरी, तो उनको उठाने के लिए कोई इंडियन का कोई काम नहीं है कि उठा सके. तो हमारे लोग जो जैसे मजबूत होते हैं, स्ट्रॉन्ग के लिए वो उठाना जरूरी है, तो वो लोग भी इसमें भी आए थे, कोई लोग बॉडीगार्ड के लिए आए थे, इसलिए यहाँ पे लाए हुए हैं.
With the passage of time, some escaped slavery, establishing communities in forested areas. But today, life for thousands of Siddhis, such as Imran, is far from glamorous. Most live on the fringes of society, in abject poverty.
स्कूल में तो जा रहे थे, स्कूल ख़त्म होने के बाद मैंने बोला क्या करेंगे, तो मन में आया कि भाई मैं थोड़ा बहुत आगे बढ़ने की कोशिश करूं। तो 5-6 लोगों को मैंने इकट्ठा किया कि भाई हम लोगों को ये अपना जो कल्चर है डांस वो करना चाहिए।
They listened, and today Imran and his friends support themselves by performing African dances spiked with a bit of drama for visitors. And when he's not dancing, he works in Gir Forest as a guide.
कॉलेज जाता है तो कोई जॉब मिल जाता है, फॉरेस्ट में मिल जाता है, आर्मी वगैरह में मिल जाते हैं, तो थोड़े बहुत पैसे हो जाते हैं, तो मकान अपने आप कर लेते हैं।
Besides their strength, the Siddhis say that the Nawabs also believed that they held a special relationship with the Asiatic lions and to nature itself.
वो लोग ऐसा कहते हैं कि जैसे अफ्रीका का लायन है, वहाँ पे जैसे अफ्रीकन पीपल है, तो एशिया में भी अफ्रीकन पीपल भी है, वो लायन भी है, तो दोनों का कंपटीशन कैसे हुआ। जैसे हम लोगों को पता रहता है कि लायन कब डेंजर में होता है, उसका हाव कैसा है, वो सब देखना पड़ता है कि जहाँ जहाँ हम लोग हैं वहाँ लायन है ही, मगर उसको क्या है कि हम लोग परेशान नहीं करते कि हम लोगों का जो परिवार है उसको परेशान नहीं करता, घर जैसा माहौल रहता है वो।
Since the 1950s, the Indian government has supported the Siddhis of Gujarat through an affirmative action initiative, recognizing them as a special tribe and granting them individual rights. They've also made it possible for them to draw benefit payments directly out of bank accounts.
They have access to education in a preferential manner. They also have access to jobs in a preferential manner.
But Imran says that accessing this aid is sometimes challenging.
पहले कि अभी तो गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से हम लोगों को सहाय वगैरह भी सब मिलता है, मगर ज़्यादातर तो क्या है सहाय तो मिलता है, ऊपर से तो मिलता है, मगर बीच में आके गुम हो जाता है। यहाँ पे जो लोग हैं, यंग जनरेशन है, उसके लिए तो मैं तो ये चाहता हूँ कि वो आगे बढ़े, और आगे बढ़ने के लिए कोई गवर्नमेंट का कोई यहाँ पे वो होना चाहिए कि भाई कि बच्चों को अच्छी तरह से पढ़ाए, और अच्छी जॉब लेने के लिए पढ़ना ज़रूरी है। जैसे आपको हिंदी और गुजराती कोई मीनिंग नहीं, इंग्लिश तो आना चाहिए, तो इंग्लिश के लिए कंप्यूटर वगैरह होना चाहिए, ज़रूरी है। कंप्यूटर होगा, उसमें कुछ सीखेंगे बच्चे तो आगे बढ़ेंगे।
And Imran has another concern. Gujarat's Asiatic lion population is threatened by increased overcrowding and competition for space among both animals and humans, and he calls for effective efforts to conserve the species.
पहली बात तो है कि अगर यहाँ से लायन जाता है तो यहाँ के लोकल लोगों को तो तकलीफ पड़ेगी ही, मगर ये लायन अगर उधर जाएगा तो उसको वो भी मर जाएगा।
The Siddhis want to stay here, living with the lions side by side. And when asked about their country of origin, they say, without any hesitation,
फिर भी अपना देश हिंदुस्तान है, तो इधर ही जीना, इधर ही मरना।
In Colombia, women in the forefront of peace.
Colombian women have been extremely active, and they have really become a very powerful political voice for resistance but also for transformation.
Women played a central role in Colombia's peace accord.
Que realmente desde ahí podría dar mis aportes, mi lucha, mi resistencia, todo lo que yo había luchado.
Making history in Colombia for the country and for women.
Colombia has signed a peace accord ending the longest armed conflict in the Western Hemisphere. But the wounds of war are far from healed. 60 years of fighting has claimed the lives of over 200,000 people and forced millions from their homes. Women were systematically targeted and endured decades of kidnappings, torture, and sexual violence. But they also emerged as central actors in the peace negotiations. Women fought for a seat at the peace table and helped expose the full extent of the war's devastating impact on their lives.
Nosotras las mujeres hemos sufrido en todo el contexto. Se sufrió la violencia sexual, se sufrió el exterminio de mujeres, el asesinato de mujeres. Nos han convertido en como ese botín de guerra para los hombres.
Deborah Barros is a lawyer and human rights activist from the indigenous Wayuu community in Valle Portete on Colombia's northern coast. The Wayuu are Colombia's largest indigenous group. In 2004, paramilitaries attacked Deborah's village, seeking to expel the community from its ancestral homeland.
Aquí en Portete hace 12 años hubo una masacre, asesinaron mujeres, acabaron con las casas, hicieron una cantidad de vejámenes horribles que hicieron que la comunidad se desplazara hacia Venezuela. Mi vida cambió porque en ese momento comencé a ser amenazada, comencé a tener mucho miedo, a temblar, pero me convertí en una mujer fuerte.
Despite repeated threats on her life, Deborah emerged as an outspoken leader for victims of the conflict. She created an organization called Women Weaving Peace, seeking justice for victims of violence and human rights abuses.
Comenzamos a hacer actividades, de que la gente pudiera hacer su propio duelo, que la gente contara su historia, que la gente pudiera hacer un recorrido en las comunidades, mirar las casas de los fallecidos. Cada relato, cada historia a mí me marcó mucho, a mí me dio más fuerza para seguir adelante y poder lograr el objetivo final, que es la paz.
Yo creo que un elemento importante es el elemento de transformación del dolor, o sea, cómo transformar esos dolores en otra cosa, cómo transformar el miedo, cómo unir el miedo para poder hacerle frente a eso, ¿cierto?
Viviana Peñaranda is an activist from Buenaventura on Colombia's Pacific coast. The city is home to hundreds of thousands of Afro-Colombians displaced by the conflict.
Lo que buscamos es el acceso también de las mujeres a esos espacios institucionales que por miedo no se llega. O sea, nosotras estamos transformando el concepto de poder.
Colombian women have been extremely active and they have really become a very powerful political voice for resistance but also for transformation.
Belén Sanz is the UN Women representative in Colombia.
The peace process was announced publicly in October 2012. At that time, only men were plenipotentiary negotiators, or those who really take decisions in the table. Women's movements called together about 500 women from all parts of Colombia. They were together for 3 days. They had the support of UN Women and the international community, and they advocated very strongly for having women present in the peace talks table. And as a result of this very strong push, the President of Colombia announced the nomination of 2 women plenipotentiary within the negotiators. So we started to see a change there.
Following the president's announcement, negotiators requested that victims travel to Havana so that both sides could hear the testimonies of those most impacted by the war. Belén Sanz was among those who accompanied the victims.
60% of the victims who visited Havana were women, and women from all diverse origins of Colombia, and women who had been victims of different forms of human rights violations, including sexual violence, which was put forward as a key element.
Cuando yo estuve en La Habana, Cuba, para mí, como mujer, como indígena y como víctima, fue algo importante porque realmente desde ahí podría dar mis aportes, mi lucha, mi resistencia, todo lo que yo había luchado como defensora y como mujer dentro de un escenario histórico para Colombia.
O un éxito de las mujeres es haber constituido la Comisión de Género, ¿cierto? Estar allí hablar y tener voz propia como mujeres. Creo que ha sido uno de los elementos pues, importantes de estos diálogos, que se tenga en cuenta el enfoque de mujer y el enfoque de género en los documentos, que salga escrito, que se mencione ya, ¿sí? Que toda la gente esté diciendo cómo van las mujeres, cómo se va a reparar a las mujeres, cómo las mujeres estamos aportando, ¿cierto? Que se tengan en cuenta todas las múltiples violencias que viven las mujeres, eso es.
Eso es un primer paso para poder lograr la paz.
In Georgia, the former Soviet Republic, more cars on the road. But what if you don't have a car?
ეხლა ჩაკეტილია გასასვლელი მთლიანად ზებრაზე დგას მანქანები მთლიანად შიშუმოპირისთვის მოძრაობა პარალიზებულია.
A new campaign to improve rights for pedestrians.
ადამიანები ვინც ხელფას ღებულობენ ამაში ეს ყველაფერი ამაზე უნდა იზრუნონ და უნდა დაარეგულირონ.
Pedestrian power in Georgia.
Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, home to 1.4 million people. The city's architecture reflects the country's past as part of the Soviet Union. Georgia gained independence in 1991 and is now striving to become a member of the European Union. But it is still a country in transition. The Tbilisi-based pedestrian rights organisation, indiani, is working to promote the rights of pedestrians in Georgia. In Georgia and other Soviet states, the United Nations Democracy Fund, UNDEF, supports the transition to democracy by funding local civil society organisations such as indiani.
This is not a project about road safety. This is a project about giving people power, particularly pedestrian power. It's about putting people at the centre of society rather than cars.
In recent years, the volume of traffic on the streets of Tbilisi has grown at an alarming rate. Legislation to meet the increased road use hasn't moved at the same pace. The majority of people don't own cars, but pedestrians, including the elderly and people with disabilities, are never given priority on the streets. Traffic on Rustaveli Avenue, the central road that runs straight through the heart of the city, literally never stops. At each end, there is a badly lit, insecure and urine-infested underpass, the only option for pedestrians to cross. The same situation is true in several capital cities in post-Soviet states.
Trying to separate a post-Soviet man from his car is like trying to separate Genghis Khan from his horse. He will not do it willingly. But what we hope is if we start from the young generation up, a new mindset can take hold.
According to the latest statistics from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, road accidents in Georgia have been increasing steadily over the past 3 years, and many of the victims are pedestrians. As in most of the former Soviet Union, there is a lingering tendency to subjugate humans to machines, because owning a machine means having power. Walking or using public transport is considered inferior to driving.
Georgia has not significantly updated its traffic laws since the Soviet time, so you could say that a lot of it is outdated, and the Soviet city planning and general urban design and the traffic regulation was more kind of car-focused. It did not emphasize the rights of the pedestrians.
Erekla Urushadze is on the board of indiani, which means go by foot in English. With support from the UN Democracy Fund, indiani identifies urban planning priorities and represents pedestrian interests in the city's planning processes. indiani regularly organises so-called ugly walk tours for concerned citizens to show how difficult it can be navigating the streets of Tbilisi and discuss how to bring about solutions. Erekla is the father of an 8-month-old baby girl, Anna, living in an apartment building in the centre of Tbilisi. moving around the city with a stroller is beset with difficulties. Irekla wants the streets to be safer for his daughter's future. With Iarepakit, he's encouraging support for new legislation to improve road regulations and therefore make it easier for pedestrians negotiating the city's streets.
Well, it's important to have this new law in order to avoid having a situation where there is no sidewalk left, no place left for pedestrians to walk, where sidewalks all around Tbilisi are occupied by cars. And this is the result of the fact that our current regulations and penalties are too mild.
The current system relies on a private company, CT Park, to manage parking in the capital. But critics say the mild financial penalties for parking illegally make it largely ineffective. The new legislation, currently under discussion in Parliament, would introduce a penalty point system so that once a driver accumulates a certain number of points, their driving licence is revoked. Guram Chaidze has used a wheelchair since he was paralysed following a road traffic accident in 1990. Once outside his home, he struggles to manoeuvre around the streets of Tbilisi. He often finds himself in situations like this. Resorting to calling the police to simply move around the streets is a daily reality for Guram. Activists hope that this can be changed by lobbying authorities to listen to the voice of the people and by campaigning for citizens' rights. One notable success was when a citizens' protest in 2013 stopped a large development in Vake Park, the largest green area in the centre of Tbilisi.
People set up a camp here in the woods. And so eventually the company that was trying to start the construction, they backed off. And eventually, a couple of months ago, the court ruled that the construction permit was illegal or the construction will no longer take place.
Sunday morning at the Iarepakit office in Tbilisi. Elena Margvelashvili, the organisation's director, and her team are getting ready for a demonstration in front of the Georgian parliament.
Today we are protesting with a group of different organizations, all working on different road safety issues. The poster says make road safety legal. So make it a law, turn it into the law, and this law has been stuck between two tiers and no one is taking care of it. So our main request is to pressure the government, pressure the parliament to pass this road safety law.
Decision makers at Tbilisi City Hall are now realising that urban planning must become a priority. But now they face a new challenge, changing people's mindsets.
It's not only the law and the enforcement that is maybe our problem, but it's also the behavior of the participants, of our citizens. But again, it must be done coupled with the media campaign that aims at raising the public awareness in a way to impact positively to all the participants of the mobility.
The vision for the future of Tbilisi's younger generation is one where pedestrians won't fear moving around the city, where public transportation is improved, where it's safe to cross the road, and where drivers respect other road users. One where the municipality is responsive to the needs of its citizens and is able to listen to their voices for the benefit of all.
When we started this project, there wasn't an organised movement for pedestrian empowerment in Georgia, and I think very little in the post-Soviet space as a whole. What we hoped in generating this project was that it could not only give the people of Tbilisi the voice they need to empower themselves, but also to serve as a model for similar projects in other countries of the region.
Through awareness-raising activities by civil society organisations such as Iarepakit, Georgia's future generations will be better informed and more mindful about traffic rules and pedestrians' rights. And humans will be considered the masters of the machines, not vice versa.